Hey guys, Hayden here again from Alarm System Store, and today I figured I'd go over some of the lesser known features and settings of the IQ Pro, just to kind of give you guys a full overview of, different options that are available to you, so on and so forth. Unfortunately, this isn't going to be a very visual video, just because the IQ Pro is programmed through the app, so essentially you guys are just going to see me going through the app and, showing you the different settings and stuff, but I'll screen record it and, you can have it up there so you guys can see what I'm doing. But the system isn't going to be used a whole lot, so sorry for the dullness. But essentially, once you get logged in, just know some of these settings are only going to be available under the dealer code. So whenever you program, or whenever you enter the programming app for the IQ Pro, it gives you the option to, use the master code, the installer code, or the dealer code. Personally, I always use the dealer code because why not? If you have it, use it. Beyond that, essentially, if you use, the master or installer code, some of the dealer settings and things like that I might show in here won't be present in your version. But anyway, jumping right in, so here we are at the dashboard. So I think I've shown this a couple times before, but right here is basically a status for your panel. I don't have a whole lot connected right now. I basically just have the core bus and the keypad connected. However, if you click this arrow right here, it actually takes you directly to the security sensors section under the core bus. So if you wanted to add like wired devices and things like that, you can just click that button for, a little shortcut, takes you directly to this section, hit the plus button, add whatever you need to. You can do wireless here, it's not limited to just wired, but this is focusing on the core bus itself. So if you added Power G devices, you would also have a Power G section here, and you can do the same thing essentially. Also, if you click this 2 right here, unfortunately it's not going to really show anything on mine because I don't have a treble. I do wish I had something real quick I could connect to it, but essentially you may have, like if you have a treble on one of your sensors or something along those lines, you'll have this 2, and then part of the line will be red. So the red would be anything that is in a treble condition. If you click the red portion of that bar, it'll actually take you directly to the treble conditions itself. So actually, let me see if I can do this real quick. I will disconnect the resistor that I have on the bell circuit here, and that should prompt a treble. And then I'll see if I can show it to you that way. There we go. So once I did that, a treble popped up on the system. Now the keypad, I have it silenced right now, but you can see there is a treble present on the keypad. So if we wanted to go in through that way, we could. However, since we're in the app, you can also just click this red section of the bar here, and it's going to take you directly to the module that has the treble. So when you see a module on your IQ Pro app that has this yellow circle, it basically indicates a treble condition. So if you click on that and then click down here, it shows you what the treble is. So before you even back out, if you're programming the panel and you just kind of want to make sure everything's good, come back to the status page. You'll see any trebles present with that red bar there. And like I said, you can just click on it and go directly to it. Same works for Wi-Fi and automation devices. So if you had, IQ Pro, or I'm sorry, IQ remotes attached, or you had like Wi-Fi modules like the IQ Wi-Fi 6, you can see those listed here as well. And then auto would be automation devices like Z-Wave and things along those lines. So quick access, easy way to read, anything that might be going on with your system. All right, so going on from there, we're going to go into the configuration section, which is where the majority of what I'm going to talk about is. Under installation, we mostly in these videos go directly to the devices so that I can show you guys, how to add, remove, change, whatever. The primary functions of the system, which would be like your zones and your keypads and things along those lines. However, if you have the dealer code, you also get these dealer settings here. Under the dealer settings, you can do a couple of cool things. Under page configuration, if you're using IQ remotes, you can enable different sections of the IQ remote. So if you do have devices like door locks or thermostats, you can enable or disable the page on the IQ remote itself so that it shows up on the IQ remote. So if we pretended this was an IQ remote, you would get a little dot down here at the bottom, and you'd be able to swipe to different pages, which will be, like a door locks page or a thermostats page, so on and so forth. But if you wanted to enable streaming your Alarm.com cameras to the IQ remotes on your IQ Pro, you can click this right here, and it will allow you to do so. So moving on, if we go into user settings here, you can enable or disable 6-digit user codes. So if you prefer 6 digits for your code, it makes it a little bit more secure, harder to guess, so on and so forth. You can come in and toggle that on, and it'll tell you that it's going to have to reformat your code. So the existing codes in here, it will automatically update and make them 6 digits. You can go in and change as needed. Moving on from there, you can set up your different partitions in this partition section. So you just toggle on the partitions, and basically it asks you, well, it takes a minute to load sometimes, but basically once it enables, you can select how many partitions you're going to have, and then from there you can go into your individual zones and assign which ones are going to be on which partition. Under the zone settings, down here at the bottom is a pretty important setting. Under the global input mode, that changes the actual supervision of all of the zones that are going to be put on your panel, all of the wired ones anyway. Wireless is always supervised the same, which is wirelessly. Wired zones, however, you can choose between normally closed end of line and double end of line. Now, most people aren't going to do double end of line. However, normally closed and end of line are your two primary options. End of line just means you're going to have a resistor on your zones. So generally you put the resistor at the sensor, so on and so forth. If you don't want to use resistors though, that's okay. They are recommended, but they're not required. So if you wanted to change that, you could just click normally closed. So now any device we connect is always going to be looking for a normally closed loop. Now there are some sensors which are going to still require a resistor, such as smoke detectors, normally open things like heat detectors, some CO or carbon monoxide detectors are normally open only, so in those cases you do still have to use a resistor, and you'll have to set that up by zone. However, like all your door contacts, windows, so on and so forth, those are all going to just need wired up properly, essentially. Backing out from there, so the RF jam, you can turn that on. Honestly, PowerG is incredibly difficult to jam as it is. I don't really see this feature even being used, even if you enabled it. However, in the future, in the next few years, if somebody devises a way to jam PowerG devices, you can come in here, turn that on, and it'll basically give you a local alarm so that you know that you're being jammed, essentially. PowerG is super reliable as is, though. It has a lot of jam prevention already built in, so you probably don't need to turn that on, but if you just want the extra security, you're more than welcome to. If we back out of that section and we back out one more time, we can go into sirens and alarms. There's a few things in here you might want to change. So if you use cross zone or 2-trip verification for fire smoke devices, you can change the cross zone timer, or you can enable the fire verification. If you're unfamiliar with that, cross zoning is where you have to have 2 sensors trigger before the alarm goes off, and that has to happen within that time period. Fire verification, same kind of concept, except it's with smoke detectors. You have to have 2 smoke detectors go off. That way it helps prevent false alarms, but it also does, reduce the chances that if something is happening, it might be caught, so it's more for like commercial applications where you expect a lot of sensors to be covering the same area, so that if you have 2 go off, it's almost guaranteed that it's going to be an intruder. Generally, you don't want to use that in residential because you spend a little bit less on residential because you want to spread out your sensors, want to make it cost effective, so you're not going to have as many sensors like back to back to back. So residential, I would leave that off, and the fire verification I would leave off as well, because you never want to take that chance. You don't want your house burning down. So if one smoke detector goes off, I'd rather pay a false alarm fee than potentially lose hundreds of thousands of dollars on my house. So that's just me. You can do whatever you want. Anyway, The Power G smoke detector siren, those are the sounders that are in the Power G smokes. You can use that to essentially, they go off whenever a fire alarm is triggered, obviously, but you can also change that so that any alarm triggers those. So if you have quiet sirens, you can enable that, and it's basically going to make all of the sounders in your smokes go off at the same time as the regular alarm too. It might be a little misleading, but at the same time, anybody that is around one of those smoke detectors is definitely going to hear the alarm, which is going to help them, stay safe or whatever the case might be. You can enable or disable severe weather siren warnings. Siren timeout. This is pretty standard, but pretty much all alarm systems will sound a siren for 4 minutes at a time. If you go much longer than that, it can start draining the battery, and you may not, if it triggers again during that period, it may not have enough juice to keep the batteries going. You can up that if you want to, but 4 minutes is the default, and I would just leave it as that. You can also enable or disable different siren types for different panics and different sensor types, essentially, if you want to. Anyway, moving on. If you go to security and arming, so under security and arming, if you click on the arming button right here, there are some options that you may want to use. Under secure arming, basically that means you have to plug in a code to arm the system. That way it doesn't accidentally get armed. If your kids tend to mess with fancy touchscreens and things like that, you might want to enable that. This refuse arming when battery low. If you do not have AC power flowing to the system and the battery is relatively low, you can turn that on so that the system refuses to arm, and that way you don't run into any problems, with the system dying while it's armed and then having, an alarm as soon as you boot it back up, so on and so forth. Auto bypass. Basically, auto bypass, just if I have a sensor open, let's say one of my windows is open, the system's going to automatically try and bypass that just so it can arm if I tell it to. However, you can disable that if you want to, and that way it doesn't bypass any zones, and it will let you know, hey, there's a sensor still open, you need to go close it. Auto stay is going to, if no delay door is opened, it's going to always arm in stay mode to prevent any false alarms from motions turning on. If you disable that, you can essentially arm it in away mode whenever you want to. However, away mode is going to turn on all sensors, like motions, like I just said, so you could potentially have a false alarm. Arm stay, no delay. Basically, if you arm stay with a function key, it will just arm immediately. There's no countdown. Auto exit time extension, that's pretty default. I would just leave that. Basically, if you need to, if delay doors open twice, it extends the countdown a little bit just to prevent any, false alarms. Key fobs, instant arming. If you want the countdown to go whenever you use your key fob, you can disable that. Key fob alarm disarm. So generally this is left off just because you don't want to accidentally disarm a potential real alarm using your key fob. However, if you want to be able to use your key fob to disarm in the alarmed state, you can enable that feature right there. By default, key fob disarming is on, so that would stay on generally. So force arm is sort of like auto bypass. However, it's basically going to just force anything that may be open. Even if it's something that shouldn't be bypassed, like a smoke detector or whatever. It's basically just going to allow you to arm and so on and so forth. Generally, I would leave that off. Delay timers. The last one is delay timers. Most people should know this. I think I covered this a couple other times in videos. However, you can change the normal and long entry and exit delays for your zones. So, your front door, you'd probably have it on a normal entry and exit because you're going to be close to where you're coming in. However, if you have an extremely long walk from your back door or a side door to the panel, you can extend this long entry as long as you need it. That does have a limit. I think, that would be 5 minutes. Does it let you? Okay, so 5 minutes is too much. I think it's around 240 seconds is what it is. So, yeah, 250 doesn't work, but 240 should. So, yeah, you can have a 4-minute delay to get in and disarm your system if you want to. Same with exit delays. However, not going to touch on that a whole lot. If we back out all the way to the configuration page, now once in the configuration section, you go down to sound, and there's a couple things you can change here. You can change the voice settings. So basically, the IQ remotes are going to have voice prompts, so you can enable or disable the different types of voice prompts that are going to be present on the system here. Chime settings, same concept, except it's the beep 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 that goes along with the DSC keypads and the IQ remotes. Trouble beeps, you can enable or disable those. So by default, they're actually off because the IQ remote kind of just announces it, and then it puts it in the little envelope thing on the top right, so it's more like an event that happened. You can go back and see it. Until it's cleared, it'll keep popping up. You can enable the actual trouble beeps. So as you heard there, it turned the trouble beeps on for the bell circuit that's being an issue right now because I don't have the resistor on there. So I'm going to turn that back off real quick. The PowerG siren trouble beeps, that will actually chime the siren itself if you have trouble beeps, so it's a lot louder. You know, if you have trouble hearing, that's pretty common with alarm systems that you may not hear it, so turn that on so the siren can let you know. RF jam troubles, you do have to have the RF jam enabled in that other section that I showed you, but it will send a chime to let you know that the RF is being jammed. So sensor low battery, sensor tampers, things along those lines you can enable or disable here, and it will chime to let you know there are troubles. So there's one more thing I want to show under the, should be under installation, under devices, and then under Wi-Fi here. One thing you might not know is the IQ Pro can actually be used as an access point. So what that means is the IQ Pro can be made into basically its own Wi-Fi router, essentially, for lack of a better term. Sort of like how you can turn your phone into an access point and let other people use the internet through your phone by connecting to it to Wi-Fi. You can do the same with the IQ Pro. So, you know, if you have a device that is close to the IQ Pro, but for some reason it's having Wi-Fi issues connecting to your regular router, you can click on the access point option here and enable that. I'm not going to do it just because it does take a few minutes to set up. You have to like plug in the SSID, you got to make a password, so on and so forth. So I'm not going to do it, but if you click that and enable it, it will pretty much walk you through the process of doing that. It can be very handy. You know, let's say there was an IQ remote nearby and you're having trouble streaming your alarm.com videos to that IQ remote. For, you know, whatever reason that IQ remote isn't getting good Wi-Fi signal from the router, and the IQ remote is close to the IQ Pro, you can turn the access point on, connect the IQ remote to the IQ Pro, and then it will actually send your video through the IQ Pro into the IQ remote, which potentially may, you know, increase your Wi-Fi strength. This can also be handy. I'm sure you've seen it if you've worked with the IQ Pro at all, but where you go in and it asks you to connect to the same Wi-Fi that you connected the panel to, you can do that with this too. Like, let's say you have a hardwired connection and you don't have a Wi-Fi connection available in the house. If this is connected to Ethernet, like directly to a modem, you can actually turn on the access point and it'll give you more range so you can go around and program throughout the house as needed. So it's kind of a neat feature. It doesn't have a whole lot of applications, but you know, when it's handy, it's handy. You know what I mean? So under third party, I don't know much about this because we don't work with Control4, but you can use Control4 integration, enabling it here. I don't know the process, I don't know how it works, but if you are familiar with Control4, you can integrate it with the IQ Pro. Now, I'm sure there's more than just turning it on in this. However, like I said, if you're familiar with it, go for it. It should be able to walk you through it fairly well and get you up and going. But anyway, that is pretty much everything I can think to cover that I haven't touched on before. If you guys have any questions on like specific settings that I covered, or you know, what a certain thing means, so on and so forth, let me know in the comments and I would be happy to explain it a little bit more in depth. However, that was a general overview of like all the different settings that you can find in the IQ Pro system. So that's going to do it for me. Hopefully that was informative and you guys learned something. If you don't mind, leave a like and subscribe, and I will catch you guys on the next one.